So that now brings us into the final part of today's session. So panelists, those of you who are still here, if you want to turn your videos on, if you want to take part in this discussion, I know that Catherine needs to run shortly, so she might not be able to join us. But so Gert-Jan, Liz, Ruth and Andy, if I just work through the four of you, is there one thing or some things that you feel have either made you sit up and think during this afternoon, or something that you actually disagree with and you'd like to push back on, or something that's that actually you would just like to underline and accentuate a little bit further? Gert-Jan, perhaps if I start with your lovely self, and then I'll go to Ruth.
Thanks, Sarah. I think the first thing that pops up in my mind is actually something Catherine mentioned in the chat as well. I think this just transition is not anything new. This is in Wales, coal mines have closed like ages ago. Mines open and mines close. This transition and changes in the use of raw materials is nothing new. And what really frustrates me is that we haven't solved it. So the problems I think a lot of us discussed now were discussed in the 60s, were discussed before as well. Why have we not found a good solution?
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Gert-Jan. Ruth, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Andy.
Yeah, there's two things I want to mention. One is, you know, my overwhelming joy really at the level of passion and emotion expressed in this session, but also just to say, yeah, and to underline what was said by Liz and also in the chat, that and until we can all express to each other the way we feel in a way that others can hear it, and that we give them that back, so we listen to them too, we can't have a meaningful dialogue. And if the industry, the people with the power, can learn to be much more in touch with those ideas and to reveal how they feel, you know, under siege, frightened to say that you're associated with the mining industry, for example. And the other thing I wanted to say is that the mining, you know, we're talking about the mining sector as a very big bucket. It is a very big bucket. It's also a very diverse bucket. And my end of the mining sector is in quarrying, really, which is a local business for construction materials. It has direct impacts on communities. And because of that, and because of the shorter timescales involved, that industry, certainly in the UK, has developed ways of producing really excellent new land at the end and operating alongside communities, because they have to. Where, you know, it's a really dense population in the UK, and we value our landscapes, as we heard James say in the Bursting the Bubble session. So within our big bucket, we can learn so much from each other, you know, different aspects of the big bucket, and also the different scales of the big bucket. So
brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Ruth. Andy, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Liz. Oh, have we lost Andy? I think we maybe lost Andy. Liz, let's go to your lovely self.
He's frozen. I think there was just one thing that I wanted to say that I think I actively tried to avoid it in my presentation, but it is a bit the elephant in the room for me in this conversation that I think we could stand to be a bit more aware of. And that's when we talk about this just transition, the transition to a low carbon future, our need for raw materials to fuel clean energy. The question we don't ask enough is energy for who? Raw materials for who? And at what cost? Because the reality is this we that need all this energy, the vast majority of that need is not coming from the places that have these resources that have yet to be exploited. We are talking about the global north, where the average person consumes a hell of a lot more energy and materials of all sorts per capita than the global south. So there's this disproportionate consumption pattern, as well as power dynamic, that I think we could stand to explore a bit more. It's a total other rabbit hole, but it feels important because this is not a universal need. We're not universally serving humanity in the transition, just or otherwise.
Great, thank you very much for that, Liz. And finding those elephants and acknowledging them is so important for us. I know that Andy's been playing with his internet, etc., his end. But what I will do is, from one cat owner or lover, shall I say, to another, Ludovine, do you want to come in on this discussion?
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for all of these great discussions this afternoon. I think what I want to pick up on most is something that Liz said, which is the complexity of the position of being in the mining sector, trying to make changes, being seen as part of the mining sector, and in all different situations, always feeling slightly left of center. I think that's something that's common to a lot of the people who focus on sustainability issues across mining and other industries. And it's a question that I think needs to be also constantly acknowledged. We tend to live and work in silos because it's comfortable and efficient. The scale and the complexity of what we're dealing with here defeat every silo. So getting over that sense of being disconnected and working across all of those silos is absolutely key. It's also difficult. It's also hard. It's challenging. It's stressful. And I want to thank Liz for acknowledging that and putting it on the table, as many of the other speakers did on various aspects of their view of the just transition.
Great, thank you very much for that, Ludovine. And Andy's back with us. Andy, your thoughts?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I lost that. It's really not my day for technology, between cats and then just the connection going down before speaking. So, well, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak. I mean, I was really impressed by the passion as well, and that's kind of the main thing that I wanted to say initially. And also kind of happily surprised at the areas of agreement, at the kind of, I'm sure with your excellent planning, how you brought together that kind of focus on communities, and how I think particularly with Catherine and Liz, things I was hearing kind of seemed to gel together. I guess one slight thing of disagreement, which will be with Mark on the end about the industry selling itself and its ability to sell itself. But I think, as was mentioned, it's a big bucket. So I understand where he's coming from. But I guess, you know, my experience tends me to be more towards what Liz was saying earlier, that I think the real big worry is greenwashing. And I'm often reminded of Robert Freeland, a sort of mining entrepreneur, who definitely comes from, I think, the different side of the bucket to me. Who described that, you know, if there was going to be a great big Green New Deal, then it was going to be, he described it as the revenge of the miners. So I think, you know, that's often what comes into my head in terms of you know, an area, you know, an idea of kind of how this thing is going to go. So I think it's up to some of the excellent people I've heard speaking here to kind of, you know, put the other side and to try and keep that going. And just one final thing, I mean, I was really impressed by that burst in the bubble idea, as I mentioned earlier. And even, you know, when I was also listening, particularly to what Gertrude was saying, that it made me think very much, and I put this into the chat, so apologies for repeating it, but it really put me in mind of this, the model that's going on in terms of getting local, regional juries of citizens to discuss the issues. And I think that's, you know, it's so beneficial. It goes to what we were saying in terms of people being able to talk through these issues. But I think because it's at that strategic level, it's the opposite of what an unjust transition is. It's an opposite of that people not being listened to, but people being given a large amount of time, enough space to really talk around the issues. And I guess this meeting is a little bit like that. Perhaps it's the start of that, but yeah, I think if we can get more of that being done, certainly in the UK and in other areas, I think that would be really, really useful.
Great, thank you very much for that, Andy. Maybe Khatri, do you want to come in on that, seeing as your name was mentioned?
No, I totally agree. And what I think, if you look at a just transition, like I described it, it takes a very long time to plan it. And I think you need to have a long-term perspective and not just focus just focus on getting people a new job. It's much more than that. It's an entire process. And the lesson I think we learn from this is we can foresee which industries might close. So we need to start planning now. If you look at COP26, there was a lot of discussion about coal mining. We need to plan now. What will we do with these communities? What will we do with the regions if that time comes? So I think we need to start thinking ahead and not just on the spot when something happens.
Great, thank you for that, Khatri. And I mean, Liz, coming back to yourself, so the ticking clock here is climate change. So the problem was the tension that we've got is that what we're trying to achieve takes a long time to plan, let alone make a reality. But we haven't got time to hang around because that temperature is rising and everything. Is there any comment you would like to make with regards to that, especially because you had all of those sustainable development goals? Climate change, of course, is one of them, about 2/3 of the way down the list, but we need to be able to do this, taking all of them into account.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had something. I mean, there's a reason it's so emotional. It's absolutely overwhelming, and yet it is utterly unavoidable. And I think that the only thing is learning better to work together, like what Ludovine was saying. We got to kill the silos, and that's as true for us folks who work within the realm of sustainability as it is for mining companies to one another. Understand that there's something pre-competitive here that we are not working on, and well beyond the industry, you know, mining with everybody else. If we don't work together on this thing, there's no way we're going to get there.
So building on that then, Liz, final comment, and we'll go around our little virtual panel that we've got here. Constructive, how do we break down these silos? So how do we do it? Liz, do you want to go first? And then I'm going to go to Ruth.
Can I go last?
Okay, Liz, you can say, can I go last? What's going to be really interesting is if all of you say, can I go last? Because then we'll just end up in this virtuous cycle. Ruth, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Andy.
Yeah, I think fearlessness is what we need to do. Fearlessness in sharing and making opportunities to hear from people who we regard as other.
Cool. Hearing from people who we regard as other. Excellent. Andy, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Khatri.
Yeah, I think honesty and an ability to build trust. I know certainly from the community perspective of some of the communities that are very much would be considered anti-mining. I mean, that's a really big trust breach to get through. So, but I also think, you know, and potentially I think there is the willingness there. So yeah, definitely for me, it's kind of how you break through that trust barrier, really.
Okay, breaking through the trust barrier. Khatri, how about yourself? And then I'll go to Ludovine.
So to me, it would be much about interdisciplinarity. So how do you get people from different backgrounds, different sort of ideas? How do you get them together and have this discussion? And I think a conference like this is actually excellent to organize that. So making sure you have a dialogue with different perspectives, different voices, because otherwise everybody will stay in their own silo and never take the perspective of someone else.
Great, thank you very much, Khatri. Ludovine, how about yourself?
Oh, mine is so less romantic. Accountability. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a governance expert, but accountability vis-a-vis ourselves and others. I'm a little struck when I hear people say, well, I can't make a difference. You're a consumer, you're an investor. If you have 5 cents of savings, you are a voter. You are, you know, you can hold a series of key decision makers to account. So start doing it and hold yourself to account in making those decisions, you know, on a daily basis. And it's hard because it's very uncomfortable. So I think changing the way we think about how we make those decisions and how we hold other people accountable will break down a lot of barriers. Because if you make it somebody's problem by holding them accountable for it, they'll find the skills, they'll find a way.
Thanks, Ludovine. Now, Liz, you're still saved. Andy has just messaged me to say he would like to come in with another comment, and then I'll come to Liz.
Sorry, yeah, just a small one. It was just basically going back to something that Liz had said. Oh, the chaos has returned as well, of course. Something that Liz had mentioned, or as that question is, it's not just, I think, about how we talk to each other. It's also about learning from other industries as well. And I think one of the real problems is, as you when you posed the questions, Liz, earlier, I mean, it is an imperative. There is so much that needs to be done urgently, but it also means that you can make the wrong decisions. And I think one of the interesting things that's come out of the discussions around forestry and deforestation is that they're moving now much more to trying to empower smaller communities. And I think that's, you know, that's a really interesting, it's very difficult because obviously you want a big project that's going to save the world, but actually, you know, maybe that's not the way to go forward. So, you know, it's great that we're talking to each other, but I think also, you know, listening to and learning from other sectors, etc., would be really useful. Okay, now I am out, but thanks.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Anybody else before I go to Liz? No? Awesome. Liz, over to you.
Yeah, I think those are all incredible points, super valid. I agree with them all. And the only other thing I think that I would add is around the courage to be vulnerable, which I still don't see enough of within the mining industry, particularly. In the incumbent culture does not encourage that. And I think that if we want to break down silos and if we want to collaborate and if we want to talk about some pretty substantial change here, that's a really important place to start. So, you know, when we're vulnerable, we share more from heart. We tap into the human connection, the thing that connects us all outside of the hat we wear when we go to the corporate office or out into the field. And I think that's the place to start because we are talking about a humanity-wide change here.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Liz. Absolutely brilliant. So just to summarize with regards to that, we had fearlessness, sharing, and really hear from those people who are other in it. And I'm imagining there were some inverted commas that were there. Honesty and building trust, making sure we've got dialogue across those disciplines, so that across disciplines. There we go. Just cop out of that one. Accountability. And what Ludovine said at the end of there was, if we hold people to account, they will find a way to be able to overcome those challenges that we're actually setting, but we need to honestly hold them to account. Learning from other sectors, as Andy was saying, and it's maybe not just that big project that's going to save the world, actually thinking about this in a more cunning fashion. And then finally from Liz, that courage to be vulnerable. Because it's through that we get that human connection. We perhaps get that trust, that honesty, that openness across disciplines as well. We say, I don't actually understand anything you just said, Hershey. So can we have that dialogue? For example, we get through those language barriers, etc. as well. I did to part understand, by the way. It was fantastic talk. So with regards to that, thank you, a massive thank you to our 12 speakers and Kat who took part in this afternoon's session. Massive thank you to all of you. Big round of applause. Thank you very much. And just with regards to tomorrow morning, so for those of you who are either in UK, Africa, Europe, etc. time zone, this is happy for all of us. For people in Australia catching up on the videos, this will be coming to you shortly. For those of you like Liz in British Columbia, my sincere apologies with regards to the timing of the next session. So at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, we're going to be joined by a raft of geoscientists. So we're going to take a look at what has been updated within those mineralogical biological resource reserve codes, where they have very much integrated a whole wide raft of different aspects of ESG into those codes of governance, which is really exciting. This is a step change in terms of what's going on there, and perhaps accountability in action. So picking up on Ludovín's point, which is fabulous. We're also going to be hearing from Mark Robinson from EITI, a little bit of which we heard about earlier on today. We're going to hear from Jamie Strauss from Digby. So again, another mechanism through which we can measure a lot of this. And then we're going to finish off tomorrow morning's session with Christian Spano from the ICMM, so the International Council for Mining and Metals. So again, another diverse group of people all sharing their opinions, their thoughts, their challenges, their concerns. And then into tomorrow afternoon session. So Liz, this is now back into a better time zone for yourself. So we're going to be hearing from a wide range of people, including US senators, or something of that ilk anyway. So we've got government from the US coming to speak to us, which is fantastic. We've got lawyers coming to speak to us. We've got social experts coming to speak to us, people who want to revolutionize how we actually undertake finance with regards to raw materials. Yeah, it's going to be a fantastically diverse discussion tomorrow afternoon. We'll find the story in that one. So brilliant. Once again, thank you so much to everybody. Really excited with regards to this discussion. Have a fabulous rest of your week and stay in touch. Thank you very much.